Now, there's talk that there could be a 4-day week coming. According to reports, full-time workers could be given the right to ask their bosses for one. Currently, the average working week for full-time employees is 36.6 hours. Employees have the right to request flexible working, but companies have no obligation to agree. The Education Minister, Baroness Smith, says flexible working would enable fewer days to be worked through compressed hours. Well, a second pilot of a 4-day week is scheduled this autumn.
It's been very tough for workers in the UK. Not only have wages been stagnant for the best part of nearly 2 decades, but on average, UK employees work the longest hours in Europe every week. It should therefore come as no surprise that many workers are getting disgruntled, annoyed, maybe even feeling slightly let down with the way the system is currently set up, because they're not being able to relax, manage a good work-life balance, and take a break. Now, the UK government have put forward 2 different pieces of legislation in a bid to try and tackle this: the right to a 4-day working week and the right to switch off. So let's examine these policies, because Labour say it's all part of a new deal for working people. So let's see just how effective these 2 policies will be in both modernising the workplace and striking a better work-life balance for the employees. Hello everybody, my name is AJ, welcome back to the channel. Let's get into it. So let's start off with the policy that will cause a pretty seismic change in the way that we operate with our contracted working hours, and that is the 4-day working week. Now, while there's not been any concrete confirmation that a 4-day working week is on the horizon anytime soon, rumours have been circulating, and it seems to be Labour's Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner, who's considering strengthening the right for employees to request a 4-day working week. Now, the theory itself is pretty easy to understand. Instead of working 5 days a week as we do currently, we'd end up working 4 days per week. But how would that work in practice? Let's say over a 5-day working week, we worked 8 hours per day. That's 40 hours per week. If we had a 4-day working week, how would that work? Are we taking less hours per week? Because over 4 days and 8-hour working days, we would then work 32 hours per week. But then we're getting reduced pay as a result of that, because our contracts are for working 40 hours a week. If we're working 32, then we're getting paid less. So a worker's going to be worse off financially? Well, reports are suggesting that a 4-day working week could be implemented with the use of something called compressed hours. And this would basically be where an employee is allowed to work their regular hours over 4 days instead of 5. Meaning that if you worked 40 hours a week over 5 days, you would then need to work the same 40 hours a week, but over 4 days. So let's do some basic maths here. If you work 40 hours a week over 5 days, 40 divided by 5, then you're working 8 hours per day. However, if you then decide to do a switch and work over a 4-day working week, 40 divided by 4, then you'll need to work 10 hours per day. That's all compressed hours are. Instead of stretching them out over 5 days, you're compressing them down into 4 days. So you don't get docked in pay, you do get an extra day off, but you'd have to work longer hours for each of the working days that you take in a 4-day working week. And if we look at this report from The Independent, Angela Rayner is consulting with trade unions and businesses ahead of new legislation expected in the autumn. Under current rules, workers do have the right to request flexible working, but employers aren't legally obliged to agree to it. The new law would see this change, with all employers needing to offer flexible working from day one of being hired, except where it's, quote, reasonably not feasible. Now, it's not really clear what not reasonably feasible would mean, but my guess is that it would probably mean someone who's part-time, temporary workers, or if your occupation is something like medical worker, firefighter, emergency worker, and you can't reasonably work over a 4-day working week, then maybe that applies to you. But we don't know anything about that just yet. It's more likely that a 4-day working week will apply to your office-based or your remote workers, because they can probably be a lot more flexible in their working schedules. But these proposed reforms, they're not coming out of the blue here, because there is an existing foundation of flexible working in the UK. From April of 2024, employers can now make statutory requests for flexible working from their first day of employment, and they can make 2 of these requests in any 12-month period. So naturally, this policy is just an extension of what's already in place, and Labour are essentially saying to workers, choose the schedule that works best for you. So workers can now choose the type of flexible working that works best for them, thereby enhancing the work-life balance and allowing workers the freedom to navigate how they wish to operate their schedules without needing to stick to one rigid routine and regime. But it is fair to say, as far as putting it into practice is concerned, results have varied. In the year 2020, the supermarket chain Morrisons decided to introduce a 4-day working week at their HQ in Bradford. But with a small catch, staff reduced their weekly hours from 40 to 37.5, working 9 hours a day instead of 8 over 4 days. But they also needed to work a 6-hour shift one Saturday per month. And the reasoning behind this decision from Morrisons was as follows. The changes would ensure better coverage across the working week, ongoing social distancing, improved work-life balance, and make the business more attractive for prospective employees, as well as retain existing staff. But Morrisons aren't the only ones. In January of this year, Asda decided to trial 4-day working weeks to thousands of their staff, which led to lower turnover rates. Sainsbury's also decided to shake up their working practices last year and introduce flexible working, including a 4-day working week. Although Morrisons did have a pretty big setback recently when they decided to scrap the scheme entirely. They retracted their 4-day working week implementation following negative employee feedback. So I guess ultimately it all comes down to, what is the scheme that's being offered by the company? Are the employees willing to accept it? Or do the employees have alternative demands? And are the companies willing to accept those demands? It's an interesting concept, but realistically, whether a 4-day working week comes to fruition or not, it remains to be seen how that's going to work across the UK, but let's see what happens. It'll be an interesting one to watch. But in addition to the 4-day working week, Labour are also introducing a new policy, one that aims to tackle employee burnout, and that is the right to switch off. What is the right to switch off? Under Labour plans, it allows workers to separate both their work and their home life and potentially make it unlawful for employers to contact employees outside of their contracted working hours. So much so that staff who are consistently contacted by bosses outside of normal working hours could well be in line for thousands of pounds of compensation under these Labour plans. Now, the government's plans to introduce a right to switch off, establishing a barrier between workers' professional and home lives, could see staff securing bumper payouts at employment tribunals. The policy, which will see employees and employers agree to an expected set of hours during which they can be contacted, has been based partly on examples in both Belgium and Ireland. But again, it depends entirely on perspective. You've got the employee's perspective and you've got the employer's perspective. Now, it will vary, scenarios will differ, but ultimately, who is better off or who is worse off as a result of this? Here's what locals in Gibraltar had to say in reaction to the plans from the UK government.
I've got a good work-life balance, work 4 on, 4 off, which is fantastic.
That we should be putting ourselves first outside of work hours, but business owners don't want that. I'm always working. When I go home, I have admin to do. I live with my mom, I work with my mom. So we never really switch off.
As a business owner, I never switch off, so I'm probably not the right person to ask. I let my staff know that I'm concerned about them. If there's any family issues, it's time off. When they finish at 5:30, it's time off. And so much so, most of them have young families. I've adopted a 4-day week so that they could have 3 days off with their families. So yes, a rested employee is a better employee.
For me, no, but my husband does work from home, like he can work from home whenever he wants. So I think sometimes even when his working day is finished, he'll often find himself still sat at his desk doing work and difficult to break himself away from it because he has that.
So again, you have varying scenarios. I mean, from a business owner's perspective, if you're a small business and you require help to get your feet off the ground and grow the company, then it could very well be an all hands on deck situation. But if you're an employee and you have a young family, then you may just want to switch off entirely so you can focus completely on your young family and helping your child grow. Now, there's no confirmed report on what this whole model in the UK will look like. I doubt very much that it will be similar to what's in Belgium currently, where it's legally enshrined that you have the right to switch off. I presume it will be something more similarly resembling what's currently in place in the Republic of Ireland, where it's more a code of practice not to contact employees outside of contracted business hours. In all honesty, it could very well be a good thing because it gives employees the right to have their own sovereignty and freedom back. Because if they're constantly switched on and focused on what's going on in the workplace and they don't have the time to just take a step back, breathe, and enjoy their own personal lives, then essentially they're not really looking after their own well-being, hence the number of mental health problems we're seeing in the UK currently, because we're becoming more and more like a worrying country. We just naturally worry about things all the time. Taking back control, to quote the infamous Brexit phrase, is a great way for employees to establish a barrier between the workplace and their home. And for workers, it could very well mean we see less mental health problems, improved mental health, improved physical health, improved communication and social lives, and most importantly as well, improved productivity and work-life balance. So the company wins and the employees win. Either way, regardless of whichever one of these policies gets implemented, or if they both get implemented in the next budget or Bill of Rights announcement, then things could dramatically change in the UK. I mean, if a 4-day working week gets implemented, then you have that extra day to yourself. Now, whether you dedicate that to your physical well-being or your mental well-being or raising a young family, who knows what kind of effect that extra day will have. Or if employees are willing to work those extra hours in a compressed time frame, what kind of effect will that have on employees? Will they feel more drained as a result of working those compressed hours despite having that extra day off? It remains to be seen. And with the right to switch off, I mean, who is that going to apply to? Is that going to apply to every single company, even to the smaller companies where if they're trying to scale up, if they're trying to grow, if they're experiencing hardship during their initial years of trying to get the ball rolling, then are employees just expected to just walk away from that challenge? I mean, if you're a small business trying to grow, then more often than not, you may need all hands on deck, especially if you get a big order that comes in that needs to be fulfilled. Because then you develop your street cred, you develop your reputation, and you're able to develop your brand and grow your company as a result. It's all hyperbole at this point, but let's see what happens, because I am genuinely interested to see how this will shift the landscape and the makeup of the corporate culture of the UK. We could be in for a very dramatic few years under this Labour government, and things could very drastically change. Thank you all for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Drop a comment down below. Let me know your thoughts on the 4-day working week or the right to switch off. Do you agree with it? Do you disagree with it? Would you do things differently? If so, let me know down below. I look forward to hearing any suggestions. I'll be returning in the coming weeks with some more content, but until then, stay safe, stay blessed, stay free, have a drink on me, and I'll see you all real soon. Take care.